Well, let's return now to our top story today. And more protests across the country are happening over the weekend. And it's all around the use of hotels housing asylum seekers. This comes as Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has promised mass deportations of illegal immigrants if he wins the next general election. Well, let's go to our North of England correspondent, that's Shingi Mararike, who joins us from Liverpool, where one of the protests is due to take place. Tensions rising across the country, Shingi. What's it like in Liverpool?
Well, Leah, you just spoke about the political picture. This is the picture here on the ground in Liverpool. There are hundreds of people in the centre of the city, those anti-immigration protesters, but also counter-protesters gathering in the city amidst what I can describe as the police doing their best to try and get a handle on the situation. You know, Merseyside police have put in place a number of enforcement powers to stop and search people, as well as powers to disperse them, but this is what you can see. So there's a few police officers in and amongst the crowd. You can see that sea of flags. That is a demonstration by UKIP, the UK Independence Party, one of the right-wing groups who are against immigration, against those people being placed in asylum hotels. And it's a sea of noise, and those Great Britain flags are also in and amongst, dotted amongst those is a group of counter-protesters. And what is different about this versus some of the protests we've seen centred around hotels is that there isn't a focal point. They are spilling out into the city centre, meaning that we've seen quite a few skirmishes and tussles between the different groups, and we've seen the police having to be quite mobile and quite active. At one point, the right-wing group tried to head into the city centre one way. They are now trying to head into the city centre the other way, but then in and amongst them you have got the left-wing groups as well who are trying to make their voices heard, and I think you can see all of that on our camera. But if I refer back to the right, you can also see the effort that the police are putting in. So here you can see those police vehicles, those vans, those riot vans coming in to help offer support to the police here. Merseyside police doing their best to continue to keep a handle on the situation, which is very much spilling into the city centre, taking hold here in the city centre. And like you were saying there earlier, this has been off the back of a week in which the rhetoric feels like it's ramped up, and there's also been movement in the courts with that decision, that interim order to stop asylum seekers being placed in a hotel in Epping. Perhaps these groups here, these right-wing groups, feel emboldened by that, and they've come out on a march that they say is against, it's a march for mass deportations, and they are here, but then the left-wing groups are trying to preempt them, and in the middle of it are those officers from Merseyside police trying to keep a hand on the situation, which we have seen tussles and we have seen some arrests, and for now they are just about managing. But what this is a picture of some of the tension we're seeing across the country right now in one of the busiest, biggest cities in the country.
Shingi, just clear up for our viewers who are watching this. So the protesters are there, but the counter-protesters are mixed in, so the police are not keeping them separate.
I'd say that they are trying their best to do that, but what is happening is, at points over the course of the last few minutes and over the last hour or so, is that the groups have tried to move away from one another and move away from the pen that the police had put in place. So when I got here, there was a kind of very obvious police marking in the middle. Now you've got the groups sort of dispersing and trying to approach one another, trying to, in some places we're seeing, get in one another's faces. So I think it's a bit of a complex and increasingly messy situation, if I can use those words. But the police have put in place other powers, so they've got the power to ask people to remove their face coverings. That's a Section 60 alpha. They've also put in place dispersal orders. I think they'll be trying to use those powers, but there's policing in practice and there's policing in reality, and I think it's getting a lot more difficult. As you can see behind me, that sea of flags, there's a sea of Union Jacks, which we will always often associate with the right-wing groups, as well as you can see St George's flags there. But then amongst that are also Palestine flags and the flags of various unions and anti-racism marches. So they are in close proximity, and that's proving quite difficult for the police.